All right, today I wanted to talk about found footage and the Mines of Moria, because there's a sequence in the first book, The Fellowship of the Ring, where they end up going to Moria, and there's just this amazing sequence that comes into play, and I really wanted to talk about it and kind of how it goes, and kind of tongue-in-cheek call it found footage. Obviously, it's a book, so it's a little bit different, but this idea of what found footage does and the role it plays in a story plays out fully here in this sequence at this point. So real quick, just kind of give a overview of found footage and all that. Usually what found footage, the goal of it is you'll have a group or party or character or individual, anything like that. Something like this, you fill in the blank, and they go to location. And this could be a cave, a mine, a island, any of these things where you'll have, usually it does generally require to be something of an isolated sort of location in this regard, so where it's kind of remote in this aspect of it. And so you'll have here, and then they will, of course, disappear, and they'll be gone, poof, and a puff of smoke, and then be gone. And then you'll have the second group, and this second group is usually the main characters. These are our main characters, the heroes or anything like that, and they go to the same location to try and figure out what happens. And so what you're doing is you have this unease tension because you're waiting to find out what happened, because whatever happened to these characters could suddenly happen here at this point. And so usually what it is you'll wait for the characters over here to kind of get middle of this location. So something where they are also themselves isolated or stranded or anything like that. And then they'll begin their journey, and then you reveal what happened to the first group from here, and this is after they're stranded. So a great example of this is Annihilation, which is an amazing movie. I absolutely love it. And they're going into this zone, the sphere, the shimmer, through this zone. And immediately when they go through there, they lose all memory, and they fast forwards 2 weeks. So they're immediately caught off guard. They don't know where they are. And then they start exploring, and then they find out what happens to the last group, where the main character's husband is going. And so what it is you'll get in the middle of this location, usually isolated and stranded, everything like that. And this is the part where nothing really happens or nothing bad, or they're able to handle it. It's kind of a mixture. You can kind of play it a few different ways from here. And it's usually not until they're in the very center of the thick of it, they will find, found footage or something like that. They'll find out what happened to the first group at this point. And then the world suddenly changes at this point. So all of this area around them, which was unknown, we really don't know what's going on, they're trying to figure out, they're planning, we're going to go in and then we're going to, get out. There's this plan. This is how we're going to get out. And once this changes everything. Oh, okay, there is no escaping. Or we're going to have to get through this, enemy or this, danger, monster, or anything like that in order to get out. This is what's going on. And this is kind of the idea that kind of plays out. Now, there's other examples of found footage, Blair Witch, where it kind of plays and does a different role. But this is kind of the aspect that I wanted to focus on and specifically pull out what it means in relation to Lord of the Rings in this one sequence. So this is the idea. And then you just have this building tension through this initial beginning part where nothing happens up until you figure out what happens. And then we're like, oh no, that same thing is going to happen to our characters from here. So back to Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings, Frodo takes the ring. They get to Rivendell, and there is, Elrond and all the other elves and everything like that, and they're trying to figure out what we're going to do with the ring. They decide, Frodo volunteers, they're going to take it south from here. And so let me draw this out a little bit. And so what they try and do is they travel, south from Rivendell, and they're heading south from here down along the Misty Mountains, this giant chain of mountains, and they got to figure out how to go over them, because there is an option to go south, but it takes you to the gap of Rohan, and Gandalf doesn't have a great relationship with the Rohans, but it also takes you very, very close to Isengard, and That is where Saruman is, and he is very much an enemy at this point. You're aware that he's up to no good, and that it's very dangerous to go that way. So we don't have a lot of great options. So what they decide to do is they're going to go over the mountains. They're going to go over here and over the mountains. So they journey south from here, and they start trying to get over the mountains, but then that doesn't work because Saruman uses his magic, it's avalanches and blizzards and all this other sorts of stuff. So they can't actually go over there without basically being in danger of dying from there because, the hobbits are not able to do it. It's just not great. So they decide, okay, that's plan A, scratch plan A. Now we're on to plan B or C, going through the Gap of Rohan, much farther to the south. Or Gimli is pretty excited about going to Moria because his cousin Balin took an expedition there not too long ago, and he really wants to go out with him. He'll be great, he's sure to have succeeded, all this stuff from here. So either way, they start heading farther. The Fellowship starts heading farther south to go from here. And then they don't initially, Gandalf is pretty hesitant to go for Moria because it's dark and scary and bleak and evil. All of that and above and more as far as he knows, because it's really not a lot is known about Moria. It's this, again, it's this isolated, unknown, remote sort of location that we've got going here. So we're getting ready to go down here, but they're not really decided to go to Moria, but then they get chased by wargs and wolves, and they start making a run for it because they kind of have to go somewhere, and there's a lot of swamps around the gate of Moria, so they decide to, we'll go for it, and we'll see from what happens from there. And so, but they're still, at this point, from what I remember, they're still not 100% sure they're going to go through Moria, but they just want to see, kind of weigh their options. Is this even an option? So because of the swamps, they're kind of free from the wargs to a degree, but they are able to get out to the gate. And the gate, of course, is, let's see, this is the gate of Moria. And this is what it ends up being. But of course, this is a hidden gate because it's completely buried and built into the actual rock. This is the one that my book has from here. And so this is the actual gate, but it's born and kind of carved directly into the rock. And so what that means is you can't really find it. You can't blast it open or anything like that. So there's a password. Gandalf ends up figuring out the password. It's speak the word for friend, Melon, as it is in the movies, Melon. And the gate opens and they're able to get inside if they want. But at this point, there's something, dark and scary in the water at this point. And a giant tentacle kind of comes out and grabs Frodo and tries to suck him back into the water at this point. And it's not great because you don't really want to get kidnapped by tentacle monsters, anywhere, but much less outside Moria or anything like that. They're able to fight it off and save Frodo and rescue them, but they have to flee into the gate. They have to go into the gate, and outside then they realize that this creature, whatever's outside, has barricaded the gate. This idea of they can't go back. They can't go back, they can't get out. They have to go through Moria now. So it's this idea of, okay, we had a plan, this unease, this is what you're building, unease and tension that you're working towards, that this is going to come into play for your story that you're crafting. Think of it from Tolkien's point of view, where you're trying to explore this idea and kind of get these characters into these situations which are interesting and make the audience want to know what's going on. And at this point, we're just building tension because this was not according to the plan. Plan A. This was plan A. Plan A did not work, so we're off to plan B and C at this point. And they really didn't even want to go with plan B, but they had to, so they're thrown off. So now they're in this remote location and they're completely isolated at this point. And we know that Balin's in here somewhere, so let's go from here. Gimli's still super hooray, we can go see Balin. He'll give us a hero's welcome. We'll get an escort, to outside to the other side of the Misty Mountains, and this is going to be pretty awesome. This will be pretty dope. And everyone else is not super thrilled. But Gimli's dwarfs, and he loves being underground, loves mountains, loves the mines, and loves his cousin, as anyone should and would from there. So at this point, this is kind of where we're at. We are isolated at this point, and we're waiting to see what happens. And this is the interesting part, because we have this real big spike in excitement, where the Watcher attacks Frodo and they escape and then they get away. And then there's this lull. And this is the coolest part with these sorts of stories, where you have this deep lull where everyone's waiting for something to happen, but then nothing does. And it's really cool to see how this gets built at this point. Because what you have then is they start going through the Mines of Moria, and at this point, it's just travel. There's nothing is happening. There's no sound. It's just darkness and bleak, and they barely can see. You can't really even see, without Gandalf lighting the way, you would be completely hopeless. It reminds me of that section in Chernobyl, when they're going into the reactor and their flashlights go out. That's the nightmare situation that you'd be running into if you didn't have Gandalf. So again, for those of you who know the story of the Lord of the Rings, you can kind of see what we're setting up at this point, this utter reliance on Gandalf. This whole idea, though, of we can't get out, we can't go back, we have to move forward, but we don't really know where we're going. This is the idea. This is the nothing. This is what we're building up. This is the tension. The nothing is happening. And it's just kind of this building tension. And this is where, after you have this sense of nothing, because again, nothing, you can't just have nothing happen forever. So you got to have something, a little bitty aspect, one little ploy that comes in that kind of starts throwing everything for the characters off, that makes them kind of feel, oh, I was feeling safe, but now I'm not so anymore. And so we have a moment like that where they come to a stop, and, they're in this room, and they're going to stop and catch some sleep and kind of get some rest. And Pippin throws a rock down a well, a deep well that just goes forever at this point. You don't really know exactly how deep it goes. It's just again, all this is like this utter blackness, this huge blackness. And there's this moment of just tension where you're just like, oh my gosh. Gandalf starts chewing him out. And then you start hearing this hammering noise, these hammering signal noises where it's like tapping, and it seems to be meaningfully something. And this tapping goes on, and it seems to be some sort of signals or something like that is going on. And then what? We go back to nothing. Nothing happens from there. And it's just this unease and tension just keeps building because you're waiting for something to happen. There's no way that this place isn't evil. It's dark. This is exactly the kind of place that all these dark, evil orc critters would love to live in and everything like that. And the dwarves, Balin, there's no sign of Balin. We don't know where he is. We're trapped here. We don't know where we're going. This is an absolute nightmare of a situation. And you're just waiting and waiting and waiting because nothing's happening. The movie does this section a little bit different. And I think while the movie does it well, and it still has, to a large degree, does the same thing, there isn't necessarily the same slow build-up that you can have in the book. There is much more of a slower build-up where you have this tension and this nothing, this kind of this tightening of the noose at this point, where it kind of goes from there. So the characters continue on. They kind of open up into one of these great halls with the giant pillars going up all the way up into the sky. And then Gandalf starts talking about, the history of Moria and everything like that, how it came to be founded by Durin and everything, and how they came and they dug too deep, This is an interesting aspect because this was, an isolated area where something terrible happened. And then Durin, was killed. Durin's bane. We get to see this whole thing. There was some sort of creature that destroyed them, but that was long ago. And now Balin's here, but we don't know where Balin is. And it's this idea, again, of tension, because you're waiting for something to go wrong, something to go wrong from here. But so far, nothing does. And they keep traveling. They keep going, and it's building this tension. And everyone except for Gimli's kind of like, yeesh, this place sucks. Gimli's kind of like, let's go find my cousin Balin from there. And they keep going and building. And then they finally find this one path that kind of heads upwards. And Gandalf is like, I think we're headed up to this watch post up near the and everyone starts getting a little bit happier. You're starting to see, okay, we seem to be making progress. We're headed upwards. It's getting lighter. You don't feel like you're in as oppressive darkness and anything like that. And then they come to this chamber. And so in this chamber they come to, there's this single pillar of light that's kind of shining down from the air. And what you have is this one, tomb-like structure. And, it's kind of, got doors on either end. So it's kind of much more of a room as opposed to most of the other places, just a complete cave at this point. And then what you have is they start getting closer to this tomb, and on this is some writing. And here, let me show you how it is in the book. There's this section here, and these runes. And here we go. Let me just read this section, because again, this section it's just so well done from here. These are Darren's runes, such as were used of old in Moria, said Gandalf. Here is written in the tongues of men and dwarves, Balin, son of Fundin, lord of Moria. He is dead then, said Frodo. I feared it was so. Gimli cast his hood over his face. And it's such a good moment because, again, we had this whole section where, you're going to this isolated event to figure out what happened to the first party. And this is kind of one of those things, now we know what happened to the first party. Balin is dead. But again, there's no way out. So now you're in the middle of this zone, the zone of danger. You could stay on the outside of this. Danger and isolation. This is, what's going to happen to me if you go in here. And you get into this point, and then you get to see that, okay, something is going to happen. Something is going on. Something unsettling is going on at this point. And then we find out that Balin is dead. And then this gets to the actual, found footage part, is because they find a book. And this book that is written in, a very, very nice elvish hand. From here that begins to details the chronicles of Balin and his adventures and their trip inside of Moria. And so what you have is now we have the actual found footage part. So Gandalf is reading this book kind of to everyone as they're sitting in here and they're looking around, and all around them are just bones and arrows and skulls and, the remnants of a great blood splatter. There's just something happened here. And there's this aspect, and Gandalf starts reading this, and he starts telling, chronicling the story where it's like, hey, we fought orcs, we slew many orcs, and we took the north, we took this passage, we took this passage, we took that passage from here. And it's all, again, as you would expect, everything is going up. It's going well. They're taking this, they found, water, they're kind of setting up from here. And we drove the orcs out from the Great Gate and Guard. But then it keeps cutting out. So they keep getting words, this happened, we slew this many orcs. And then it kind of phases out from here. We don't really know. So you're getting these gaps. So you're trying to figure out what's going on and what happened. Because again, whatever happened to Balin and this crew is likely going to happen to us, happen to our characters. And they're kind of going from here. And then they keep fighting. There's more fighting. We've taken the 21st Hall of the North to dwell in. There's something where Balin set up a seat in the chamber of Mazar Bul, chamber of records. Gimli's kind of giving them this added context from here, or about what's going on and how this whole adventure. And then they find gold and, helms, and they're finding. So far, everything's looking up. Everything's looking up. Everything's working out from here. But again, audiences knowing something, it didn't all go well from here. We need to go. And then suddenly it cuts lost. There's this gap from here. And he can't make out any of them. Gandalf can't figure out what's going on. And then hold on, something else happened. The handwriting changes. So we know there's this big gap here. There's this big gap of nobody knows what happened here so far. And as we're reading this, okay, it looks like it's Ori's hand. I fear he had ill tidings to record in a fair hand. The first clear word is sorrow. Turns out that Balin was slain. An orc snuck up behind him and shot an arrow in the back of him. And then what's happening is you start realize that the tides have now starting to turn. Because you start talking, instead of slaying orcs and killing them, it's like we're holding them off.
They have taken the bridge and the second hall. We have barred the gates, but cannot hold them for long. The ground shakes. Drums, drums in the deep.
From here, it seems that Balin took the title for less than 5 years. So this is a whole expedition that they were going on. And this reading, it starts, they keep skipping this and it keeps going. And it gets to this one line, which is such a good line.
We cannot get out. A shadow moves in the dark. We cannot get out.
And this is the echoing sort of curse almost, that as you're hearing this, because again, you're not hearing this from outside Moria and be like, man, glad I'm not there. You're in the heart of Moria. You had no choice to be here. You're in the exact heart of Moria. And you have this thing, we cannot get out. We cannot get out. They, and then at this point, the party is basically saying, we need to get out. This is not good. We know what now happened to the first party. It's this found footage. We've been through the footage and we know it's not good. This same thing is going to happen from here. And right as Gandalf says this, they start to hear the drums. Beating drums that just in the echoing distance of darkness of this myriad of passages that are underneath and crawling through Moria, and you don't know where it's coming from. All this passages, all this darkness, just everything is surrounding them. They're completely isolated. They don't know where they're going. They're going from here. And then Gimli, of course, shouts, he almost shouts in this, we cannot get out. We can't get out. They're coming. We cannot get out. And it's this echoing. And so you see this doom approaching the party as history begins to repeat itself. We know exactly what happened with Balin. We know exactly what happened to the party. And suddenly doom, doom, doom is approaching. And then they begin to slam the door shut. And this is, they slam the door shut and start trying to barricade it from here. And this is the part that's just, it's such a good and well-crafted scene from here because we've gotten the party to where they've made good decisions. We understand why they went to Moria. There's not really a question of, man, they really should have just not gone. They had no choice. Frodo got captured. They had to get out. They had to run from the Watcher. All of these aspects are coming into play. And now they're stuck in this isolated, dark place from here. And now they have to fight their way out. And this is where the next sequence is just well done because it's the payoff for this slow building tension, where Frodo gets attacked by the Watcher and they enter Moria, and then it's just this lull from here. And then they find the book and they see this, hey, this echo of what is going to happen from here with this repetition of history going to repeat itself because now we are in the same position. We're in the tomb. The tomb of the sarcophagus, or looking at the sarcophagus, the tomb of Balin, Lord of Moria. This almost ironic title because he's Lord of Moria for a very short period before they murdered him and killed everyone around him. So he led his people to die, and it's this utter great tragedy because Gimli's also, the movie does a great section of this where they kind of see Gimli in his sadness at finding his family is dead and all of everyone who went with them died, and they all were killed at this point. And so this is what you have. This is the echo of this, and they figure out what's going to happen. And then here, they get attacked. Doom, the drums are approaching, the orcs are approaching, and they've captured them. This is what we've been building towards. And so now the Fellowship has to fight their way out, and it's this amazing chase sequence where they're trying to fight their way out and get away from Moria, find their way out, trying to figure out where it's going. And they start running and fighting. They killed the orc chieftain. Frodo almost dies, gets speared. And then we have this idea, showing where, we mentioned before about the whole reason behind Moria, why you came here, was for the mithril. And we have this payoff, little sequence where Frodo has the mithril. And they keep going and running out from here. And this is the point where then we see again we have this kind of double payoff because what you have is turns out Balin's not the first party that came. There's actually another party that also was here first. And this is what Durin is. So what happened? So we had this first payoff with what happened with Balin and the orcs attacking. And as we're running, we come to this certain, bridge. This is the bridge of Khazad-dûm. It's very little thin, and we have this deep chasms down here. The bridge of Khazad-dûm, where you have this idea, and they start escaping off it, and they're going single file, and Gandalf's heading up the rear, and then suddenly the orcs leave them behind. The orcs all pull back, and normally this would be a great thing because the orcs are finally pulling back, but then you're like, oh my goodness, why are they, they're not pulling back, they're running. Something else is back there. And this is where you get the payoff of the original party, Durin, what happened to Durin? And then you realize and come face to face with Durin's bane. And this is where we see the Balrog. And you have this amazing scene with Gandalf where Gandalf is trying to fight up against this Balrog that's coming from here, the Durin's Bane from here. And this is where we have this, oh my gosh, what is going on? We have to get out. It's this anxiety, this tension, all of this is building, and it's going up and up and up, because you had to think, what is worse than getting trapped with a whole bunch of orcs? Where's the tension going to go? Where are the stakes going to go from here? Is it going to go down? No, it's going up. Why? Because we're introducing another and even greater evil creature that is living down here. And it's been set up beautifully because, we know exactly what's going to happen. It's not like they didn't introduce this. They set it up. They said, hey, everyone here who was here originally died. This is how they died. This is why they died. And this is who that killed them. And now we are coming face to face from there. And this is where Gandalf has this great fight with the Balrog, that great moment of you shall not pass and everything like that. And then Gandalf and the Balrog fall, the bridge collapses, and then Aragorn and the party and everyone else has to just leave. They have to leave them behind because they can't stay there from here. And this is the whole sequence at this point. And it's a beautifully crafted scene from here because there's this just anxiety that's just constantly building, tension that just keeps tightening and tightening and tightening and tightening. And just every time they get a victory, something worse happens. They fight off the orcs. They're winning. They're kind of doing okay. The orcs are fleeing. And then suddenly the Balrog shows up. The Balrog, Gandalf seemingly is able to fight them off and something's going to happen. And then it's, the fly, you fools. And then he falls down. And this is it. And it's a beautiful, beautifully crafted scene of this horror and tension that's coming into play from here. And this is what I just wanted to cover because I thought it's just such a well done scene. It's just well done scene in the book, and in the movie did a great adaptation for it from there. So, but yeah, that kind of covers everything I wanted to talk about. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'll see you in the next.